Hey everyone, welcome to Talent Talk. It happens to be Tuesday at 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, which means I am live with two fantastic guests and really excited to have you all in with us today. But most of you probably are listening after the fact, and that's okay. So make sure that you are subscribing to whatever platform that you might be listening in on, whatever platform you might be choosing to listen to. I think we have something like 10,000 downloads a day across all the different platforms, millions of downloads a year. And we're just really, really thankful for everyone who tunes in every week, whether it's live or if it's after the fact on the podcast, and is able to interact with our guests, learn from our guests, which is why I started the show, is I wanted to have more awesome conversations with incredibly talented people who have unique perspectives and ideas and concerns and maybe inspiration for me to be thinking about it. Instead of me being the only one to talk to them and to ask them these questions, I thought, let's put it on the show. Let's put it on the radio and let's let them talk to a whole audience at the same time. So that's really been what we've been doing here for years. I think we're just over 300 episodes that we have done since we began many years ago. And, a lot of the stories initially from the show ended up in my first book, The Power of Company Culture, which I'm really proud turned out to be a bestseller. And then I just last week, many of you know, released a new book called Remote Work. And that hit #1 on Amazon in the HR category, is a bestseller now. And if you haven't checked it out, well, there's no time like the present. So go on Amazon and look for Remote Work, Chris Dyer, and I promise you won't be disappointed. And if you are, well, you can always say bad things about me, I guess. So anyways, we are live every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But for those of you listening live, one of the things we like to do is have you interact with us on Twitter. So at PeopleG2 or the hashtag TalentTalk, we are live tweeting as we go through this conversation. You can contribute, you can like, you can argue with us, you can, any sort of links that we might mention, books and profiles, those will all be placed there in Twitter as sort of your little repository as you're going through. So if you're listening live or relatively close to when the show was recorded, it's a great place to go and interact and check out our guests, follow them, and learn more. All right, let's go ahead and talk about who's on the show today. Enough of the business. Today we're going to have on President and CEO of the Blazing Group and my big idea and awesome glassware, Michele Bailey, to the show. And then after the commercial break, we'll bring in President and co-founder of Greenhouse Software, Jon Stross. But let's go ahead and bring in Michele. Michele, welcome to the show today.
I'm so excited to be here with you today, Chris.
Well, anyone who's listening, you'll have to use your imagination. But if you're watching on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see her awesome glasses. And I like wearing my fun glasses too. So you said you have 27 of them around the house, which definitely breaks my record. So, and they're all color coordinated, which I can tell you have definitely a design sense. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about you, what you do, what's important for us to know about in our conversation today.
Okay, my name is Michele Bailey, and I own two companies. One is called Blazing. It's an advertising agency that has been around for 26 years,
Wow.
Which is unheard of in our space, especially a woman-run agency. We work with all kinds of brands, from Edward Jones to Castrol Oil and everything in between, finance. We work in all industries, and I have an incredible team, many of which have been with me. The average tenure here at Blazing is 16, 17 years. Again, unheard of in the industry. That led me to start another company that has nothing to do with advertising. It's called My Big Idea. And what My Big Idea does is helps corporations help their employees come up with work-life blend. Notice, Chris, I didn't say balance. There is no balance. It's work blend and integration. So I delivered out of practical experience and watching what my own team was going through and my clients. I created this wellness and employee engagement platform that is absolutely amazing.
I love that term. I'm going to steal a blend. I will credit you, of course. But I love that idea because for years I've been telling people there is no such thing as work-life balance, especially because me and my team were 100% remote. And so the lines, bleed a little bit more. There's less of that signpost. I'm not driving to work and then I go in the door and it's like, oh, it's time to work, right? And then I leave at the end of the day and drive home. Oh, it's time to stop. I don't have those natural signposts working remotely, working from home, or being on the road and all of that. And so the blend is a great concept, and I'm going to make my interpretation. And I'd love for you to kind of, go a little deeper. It's finding those times to turn it on and turn it off, right? And is it a good time for me to work right now? Yeah, it might be 9 p.m. at night, but I got energy, I got passion, I want to work right now. And then I also need to not feel guilty when I'm really not in the mood to work and I'm really unproductive at like 3 o'clock on a Wednesday. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be trying to force it right now and let it come back to me later when I am feeling it. Is that what you mean by blend, or is there sort of more to it?
For me, Chris, there's more to it. What I help people do with my big idea is look at the different areas of their life where they need to get real clarity, focus,
Mm.
so they had a roadmap moving forward. So when I start a workshop, I start with reflection. 10 questions about what worked and what didn't work the past year, like very direct questions. This book workbook is only for you. So you need to be honest with yourself. And I teach by showing people the answers I've put to some of the questions so they can see how hard I want them to reach in. Then we look at personal goals, professional goals, health and wellness goals, finance and wealth, relationships and your support network, refueling to be the best version of yourself, whether it be at home or at work. And then I end every session with a gratitude because no one of us is here today without the help of people along the way. So it's up to you to let people know how they've impacted your life, the difference they've made. So I actually created 7 questions that if you answer these questions and tell them to somebody else, give it to them, say it to them, it changes relationships. So much so, Chris, that like you, I just launched a book April 16th. It's a Forbes book and it's called The Currency of Gratitude. And I launched that because Forbes had heard about me and the sessions that I teach on gratitude and my big idea. And they said, can you write a book to show business leaders how easy this is? I'm there. I'm 6 weeks out of the gate. And day 8, I became an Amazon bestseller.
Awesome. That is awesome. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about what is the currency of gratitude.
Well, Chris, for me, I called currency of gratitude because for me, gratitude is a currency just like money. It has value. So picture this. If you're taking a bunch of money and you're stuffing it in your mattress, nothing happens. It stays there. Just like gratitude, if you do not express it, invest it, pay it forward, give it away, you don't get anything back.
Hmm.
That is the lesson I'm trying to teach people. While I firmly believe in, waking up and being grateful for the things in your life, meditation, mindfulness, a gratitude journal, what I feel I'm now teaching is how to take gratitude and push it outward to others. I feel gratitude needs to be given away, just like energy. When you have good energy and you're having a good day, you owe it to someone else to give them some of that energy because especially now people are grappling with so much. Give your energy away. It just multiplies and adds something to someone else's day.
It's a really great reminder because, we could easily sit in a senior level leadership meeting and say, boy, Tom and Jessica are really killing it. They're doing a great job. They're our key employees, but they're not sitting in the meeting, right? They don't know that we just talked about them, that we think they're great, they're doing all the things we want them to do. Instead, what we should be doing is going to them and telling them how much we appreciate them or calling them out, and however your company does recognition and gratitude. But I can't tell you how many times I've seen people, in one level talk about people at a different level, but they don't know about that. They're missing like this wire or this, I don't know, telephone wire or something to know that, geez, I am appreciated. Geez, I am going in the right direction. Geez, I am doing the right things. And so how do we do more of that? How do we sort of expand? Is it just an individual thing one at a time? Is there something that we have to? I'm a big believer in like systems, right? Can we institutionalize this in some larger scale inside our organizations?
Well, that's a couple twofold. You asked me about setting, systemizing it, and doing it individually. For me, the biggest impact has been doing it individually. And I often do it in a handwritten card. Not that gratitude always needs to be expressed with a card, but for me, when I write a note to somebody, to express my gratitude, I answer 7 sentences. One word that describes you. You came into my life. You bring me joy by. You inspire me because. I hope to add to our journey together, and I want to thank you for. Answering those questions, Chris, changes relationships. When I write those cards, wherever I go, whether it be friends, clients, family, suppliers, strategic partners, I see my cards in their office, in their homes, because it takes me 5 minutes to write that, but the meaningful impact it has for others is amazing. So individually is the way I like to express gratitude the best. And also, especially through these times, Chris, active listening.
Mm.
Silence do the lifting. Being open and receptive. Some people just need to vent and tell you how hard it is for them right now. There's different ways that gratitude can be shown and given. As far as groups, I also have a team. They are now all working remotely, not in the offices. I go out of my way to do things like socially distanced barbecues. I send them packages of cookies and cupcakes. I send them bottles of wine with cheese trays with just a little note, thinking about you. I know it's tough. Have this with your partner tonight. Just little things like that. So can it be systemized? Well, Chris, the last question is, for me, I've systemized it. I systemized it because in my planner every week, I write down under the thoughts for gratitude in the My Big Idea planner. I write down notes under reflection. Who do I need to think about this week? Who needs a little extra? And then I have a section for gratitude. And every week in that gratitude section, there better be 2 up to 7 people that I need to let them know how they've impacted my week, my month, my day. And I do that in whatever way I think would be best received by that person.
You know, we do, I've talked about in the show before, but we do this thing called green flags inside of our water cooler room in Slack. And so it's completely just an act of altruism. It's just, hey, this person did something great for me, or I noticed they helped the client out. It's more of a virtual, pat on the back. We don't promote on it. We don't, give gift cards on how many green flags. There's nothing gaming. It's just, thank you. And I noticed, because tend to not be that good. I'll write down some things I have gratitude about, but I won't. I probably would never be as consistent as you are with sending stuff out like that, right? Every year I tend to do that. I'll go and really send out a lot of cards, and I'll write things, to my employees. But I noticed that they were giving me the real clue into who I needed to go and say thank you to. Because if I noticed that one person was getting a lot of these green flags during the month, well, I should probably, as a CEO, go and say, man, I noticed you've been killing it, right? And on the flip side, if I noticed that someone got one and hadn't had one in a very long time, then I would call them and be like, hey, tell me what you did. Tell me what that was all about, so I could get that story, and that kind of encouraged them to do more, right? And to make a bigger deal out of the one, because I never wanted anyone to give a green flag, like a participation trophy. I don't want to give them out just because someone hasn't had one in a while. So it sounds like it's a matter of, you got to come up with a good process for you, and then you got to come up and then translate into a good process for your people, if you want them to kind of all work in conjunction. Because, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say absolutely. And I love the fact that you made a mention of the person who maybe doesn't have a flag or just one flag, because often, Chris, especially the last 15, 16 months, those people that are quiet on the video calls, that look very distant, are the people that we need to reach out to the most. They need us. They need the connection, because we're all missing that.
Yeah, yeah. So how do we take gratitude in? This is a lot of our listeners want to know. Okay, the squishy stuff is fine. Make my people happy, that's fine. But how do I make my business grow faster, right? So what's the connection between gratitude and business growth?
Absolutely. Okay, so then I'm going to take you back to the 2 companies that I have. Blazing is an ad agency. We are all about creating brand awareness. My big idea is looking at the employee as a person, an individual first and a professional second. So that's my big idea. When you get people clear and they're on board, they become brand champions. So you've got brand ambassadors and brand champions. When you throw in gratitude, it finishes the Venn diagram because then you get brand loyalty. And when you get brand loyalty, you get business growth and you get business results because sticky people stay. Sticky people stay because
Hmm.
percent of people right now are burnt out. 56% of people are looking for a job actively or passively. And if that person leaves, it takes 33% of their salary to replace them. So those numbers speak for the ROI of gratitude and loyalty and brand champions. Those numbers alone.
Now, are there some things that maybe people should, I guess, be careful about as they put together the strategy? Because, I've have had people send me a note or send me stuff, and it can sometimes has felt maybe a little contrived, or maybe it was, they were just sending out 50 of these, or you get one every other month, and they're like, yeah, I mean, so there's got to be a balance there, right? Between it needs to be authentic, it needs to be something that really happened, it needs to be, I would imagine, again, for the pure sake of just saying thank you, not for, geez, I want you to say thank you because I want you to spend more money with me. So are there other types of things that maybe people need to be cautious of as they begin to do this kind of strategy?
You know what? You said the word. It has to be authentic. It has to be real. When I show gratitude to someone, I expressively tell them what it is I'm grateful for or
Yeah.
what I appreciate that they've done for me. So when you're talking about, 50 chocolate bars being sent out to people with what looks like a customized note, no, that's a marketing campaign. That's a drip campaign. This is not what gratitude is about. It's about like when the crisis hit several months into the crisis, my husband's company, I said to him, "What are you doing for your clients?" He has a group benefits consultancy. He said, "I don't know. What should I be doing for my clients?" I said, "You work with HR people. They're stressed out of their mind. And to just write them each a gratitude card, thanking them for sticking with you. How can you help? What can we do? And I just want to thank you for choosing us to be your group benefits partner." He sent out 100 of those cards. Unexpected. You should see the calls he got back. And he said,
Hmm.
"Here to help because we know you are dealing with an incredible amount of stressful employees and anxious employees. And I just wanted to remind you that we care and you matter." Simple.
Yeah. I remember right at the height of the pandemic, I mean, I sent out a note to all the business owners that we work with and said, hey, if anybody wants to talk and just exchange notes on what what you're hearing, whatever, I'm like, I'm here. I'll, have a conversation with, because I didn't know what else to do for them. Right. And, I had only a few that really wanted to have that conversation. I think a lot of people were just stressed. It was too much noise. They didn't have time, or they were fine. And it was really interesting. The ones I had the conversations with, they were just dying to just talk through it with somebody. Just even if what we said was we didn't know anything, we didn't know it was going to happen, which we didn't, right? They just wanted someone to, like, I guess, be in that same dark place with, or just commiserate with.
No,
Misery loves company.
but you know what, Chris? And talking about that, you know what I started doing with my clients is virtual lunches. You go get your lunch, I get mine, we eat it together, or coffee dates, or wine at the end, or a cocktail at the end of the day. I have clients who were so busy during the pandemic, I was lucky to see them once a quarter. Now they won't let me get off a call without scheduling next month's virtual lunch. And we show each other what we're eating. And we just pretend we're in a restaurant on a patio. And we
Right.
just have a conversation about everything but work.
So that's another really good key that we listen to. If you're going to go and I learned this lesson a long time ago, and it seems counterintuitive, but someone once told me when you go visit a client, don't talk about business until they bring up business, right? And I was like, well, you could end up talking the whole time and never get to the thing you wanted to get to, right? And I think that's only happened once where the person just didn't ever bring up business. And all the other times, eventually they go something, and then now you're in it, right? And if they're willing to bring it in, then you can bring it in and start talking. But man, does that change the whole dynamic, right? If you can't bring up work, you suddenly really have to, as you mentioned, active listening. You really have to know the person and get to know details about them and ask things on the personal end, which then really bonds that relationship. And to your point, makes it sticky, right? And sticky people stay. I love that. And another thing that Michelle's given us today that we're definitely all going to have to steal. Just don't forget to give her credit. So, well, what are some of the challenges? What you've mentioned a couple of times. You mentioned what your husband did and what you did. Are there other maybe sort of things we should be thinking about as we're expressing gratitude coming up, right? Because we had gratitude during crisis, and in some ways, I almost felt like it was easier for leaders to like do something because it was like, okay, this is a crap time. I know this is when I'm supposed to step up. Yeah, I'm going to talk to all my people. But now, as we're sort of coming back to maybe things are a little bit better, are we going to get complacent? Are we going to get slow down? So what should we be thinking about here for the rest of the year as things begin to change?
People are nervous and anxious and skittish. We're trying to find our way around what this next phase looks like, both at work and socially. So, what I have found the most impactful is sheer transparency and vulnerability. So, when people, I might say to you, "How are you doing?" You go, "Fine, really looking forward to going back to the office." What I will say is, you know what? I'm really struggling. I'm very anxious. I'm worried about who wants to come to work and who doesn't. I'm worried about what our future might look like, what our real estate's going to be like. I'm I lead with vulnerability and I'm very honest with it. Even though I'm the leader, they need to know that I'm scared and I'm unsure, just like them. But then I reassure them that we will figure this out and we will figure it out together. We've been through, we've been together a long time. We've been through some recessions together. Went through an employee embezzlement, fraud, and forgery at my firm, which nearly bankrupt us. So we will get through this, but I need to hear, and what I can't hear if you don't tell me. Mind. So I need you to be honest with me so we can deal with it from a place where we're both comfortable. Chris, I might have some people who say I never want to go back to the office. And as an ad agency, collaboration, strategy, the energy here is paramount. Paramount. So what happens when someone says, I'm not coming back? I don't feel safe. I've got to figure that out. I got to respect that.
Right. Right. And that just takes, I think that's really the future of work is leaders and managers and business owners being able to create what is fair, but not necessarily equal for all employees, right? How do we create this customized approach so we can attract and retain our best people? And I think really the attract part is big because you may have only considered people who could work from 9 to 5 in this particular part of the city, whatever. And that meant that you couldn't really access talent pools and people who can't work those consistent hours, but they could work them in pieces or in different ways, right? And you might get someone who's fantastic, who's also raising kids or taking care of a sick spouse or, whatever. And for me, that's always been the benefit of remote work is we could tap into these talent pools that nobody else could or nobody else wanted to or nobody else was even thinking about because we couldn't afford the New York or LA, prices and cost of living and all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to kind of hear you kind of go through some of that and think about what's going to come next. You mentioned transparency is you kind of talked more about gratitude, but transparency was a part of that sentence. And would you agree that that's probably the easiest place for leaders to start if they want to create more of that with their people is to start with being transparent before they worry about, I guess, sharing all their feelings or all of that? Is it just a matter of making sure everyone's on the same page?
I think transparency is key, especially in a leadership position, because we don't have all the answers and we're trying to figure it out like you. But I will tell you, Chris, transparency and vulnerability are very, very hard for a lot of people to show.
Right.
So, you don't open the kimono all up at once, but start to show little pieces where You're not all wise, all knowing, all everything. You're
Yeah.
just trying to figure it out as we go along and trying to create the best, safest, and most productive situation, understanding and hearing what their fears are.
Well, Michele, it's been wonderful having you on the show today. I really hope we can have you come back at some point and give us more updates and more thoughts and leadership. The last quick question before we go is, how can people find out more about you? What's the best way for them to learn more about you and what you're doing?
Go right to michelebailey.com. Michele has one L, Michele, Bailey, just like it sounds, Irish cream, .com. And that's the Forbes website, and it'll lead you to my big idea in blazing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break and bring in our second guest, Jon Stross.
Imagine buying a newspaper and discovering that the news you're reading is 6 months old. There isn't much that stays the same for 6 months. And the same thing goes for background checks. In a time when so much outdated information is being passed around, it's good to know that People G2 offers something different.
Here's Jon.
People G2, we provide today's intelligence, not yesterday's news. Our value-added approach offers you a fully FCRA compliant solution that includes up-to-the-minute information. By combining industry-leading technology with old-school human investigation, People G2 is able to give you information that is accurate right now, delivered quickly through our online system or integrated with your HR system. So ask yourself, are you comfortable working with old news, or are you ready for a different kind of background check company? Visit peopleg2.com or call 800-630-2880. That's 800-630-2880 or peopleg2.com.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk Radio Show. In case you missed my first guest, Michele Bailey, you can check out her interview on iTunes, iHeart, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, or even go to talenttalkradio.com and subscribe there. We'd love to have you all also be a part of the conversation on Twitter right now. So if you're there, go ahead and follow @PeopleG2, and you'll be able to see all the best comments, links to profiles or books or anything else that we mention as we go along on the show. My next guest is president and co-founder of Greenhouse and co-author of Talent Makers: How the Best Organizations Win Through Structured and Inclusive Hiring. Jon, welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? I know a little bit about your company, as I think our platform is integrated into your platform, so we sort of know a little bit about you. But what's important for our listeners to know about you and the work that you're doing?
Sure. So Greenhouse is a hiring software company, ostensibly in the applicant tracking space, and we've been around since 2012. And the really premise of the company was that we saw more and more companies who are realizing that hiring is no longer just an administrative or compliance function; it's a strategic function. Companies, the way to win a business is to win at hiring. And so when a company makes that decision, they decide they're going to hire very differently. And so our aim is to be the catalyst to help companies make this transition to become great at hiring.
So I've really noticed that, and the pandemic helped with this, but we've finally in the last year or two maybe started to see some big advancements in how we're handling people as it relates to, bringing them on board and all of that. I mean, I think it's long been said that people are our company's most valuable asset, and yet we treat them like total crap during the onboarding process and anything to do with compliance and all that. So, how are I guess, are you kind of seeing this change? Are you seeing that being more of a focus, and why?
Absolutely. I think what we saw was, when everybody was forced to do all remote hiring, adapting a recruiting process to doing it remotely wasn't so hard to get your head around. It was like, well, we used to do in-person interviews. Now we'll do them over Zoom.
Right.
That took about 20 minutes to adapt to, right? When it came to onboarding, say, well, how do we get a new hire into the company effectively? That was profoundly different. And what people realize is that onboarding historically was thought of as, make sure that they get all the paperwork signed, they're on payroll, they have a computer and a desk and a phone. And now folks are realizing, well, actually onboarding is far more profound than that. It's how do they become a part of the community of the company? How do they learn the culture and values of the company? How do they learn the social norms of the company? And you used to just do that by throw people at their desk next to all their teammates, and they'll kind of figure it out.
Right.
This world, you can't do that. And so everybody started to get really nervous and say, for all those years that managers were saying, I don't really feel comfortable with remote work. It's like, well, now you're forced into it. And so what we saw was companies getting far more intentional about how am I going to bring people in? How do I create a plan so that nobody falls through the cracks? That introvert who doesn't proactively reach out is going to make sure that somebody's their buddy, somebody's having virtual lunch with them, and that they are becoming a part of the community of the company.
Well, we, for years, we're all in one office in one little cubicle farm, and we did a terrible job of onboarding and a terrible job of communicating and a terrible job of being transparent. And then when we weren't together in 2009, we went fully remote. We got really good at onboarding and really good at communicating because we couldn't be lazy anymore, right? It's just
right. You have to be proactive about it. And so that's the thing is there are companies like that who had done this years ago, right? Even at Greenhouse, we had certain teams who had already said we're going to be fully distributed. And so we had a whole playbook of how to do it. And you realize like it's not rocket science, like it's all doable, but you have to be really proactive and intentional about it. And I think a lot of companies had to get up that curve very quickly over the last year. And so I think that'll all last, frankly, afterwards, because more and more people probably won't be coming back to the office, and all these things that people have realized about how do we be good at onboarding, they'll continue to do, because why not?
And it's amazing all the innovation that's come out of it. I mean, we had to come up with how do you verify someone's ID and be able to do I-9s and all that stuff. We developed a whole new technology for people to be able to use their mobile phones and be able to, but on the flip side, like allowed them like the control to get it done quickly, right? Which sort of gave them the autonomy to get, if they want to be, if they're motivated, they want to start their job tomorrow, they could get it all done themselves, right? Very, very quickly, as opposed to waiting for the HR person to call you back, and then you can come down on maybe next Wednesday at 1 o'clock would work, that kind of thing.
Well, you just think of like the emotions of like getting a new job, right? It's like usually you go through all of this excitement to accept the offer, and then the company goes dark, and you have a couple of weeks where like nothing happens, and then you get all this anxiety about what's going to happen, and you go on the first day, and you fill out paperwork, and you hope they remember to order your computer. It's this huge letdown, and there's all this data that shows that employees make the decision of how long they're going to stay at the company in the first 3 weeks of employment.
Oh, I've heard it's like the first day they know if they're going to last 2 weeks, right? In the first 2 weeks, they know if they're going to last 2 months. And it's crazy.
Exactly. And that's where you realize like, all right, you can get all that paperwork stuff done even beforehand potentially. So that first day is about joining the company and learning your job and meeting your coworkers. And there's huge advantage to be had by that.
I have told people this probably more times than I want to admit, but I've said, if you're not ready for them to come in on their first day, don't have them come in. Like, just delay. Like, say, I'm really sorry. We're getting everything ready. If you want to pay them or not pay them, I mean, that's up to you. But like, you could tell them, just don't come in tomorrow because we're not ready. We don't want to waste your time. Go, read more about the website or go research more or, go down the beach and enjoy your day off. Like, what's the point of bringing them in if you don't have their computer, you don't have their business cards, you don't have pens and paper for them, they don't have a desk, they don't have... it's just so frustrating for those people. So
I always compare it to the customer journey, right? Is like how prepared would you be to go to a sales call to sell a potential new customer? How prepared would you be when they sign on the dotted line and now they become your customer and you have to onboard them? And if you could say, look, we're not going to bring that same level of rigor and preparation, the recruiting process, the onboarding process. It's like, well, what are you saying to those employees? What's the signal that you're sending to them?
Well, yeah, putting it in your world, could you imagine starting with, okay, today's launch day for your new Greenhouse software, but we didn't create any of your admin credentials. No users have been put in. Can you imagine? What would be the point? You didn't really launch, did you?
That's right.
Well, I know your new book is called Talent Makers. So what is a talent maker?
Sure. So talent maker is a phrase we coined to talk about business leaders and what is their responsibility in the hiring process. The history of it goes back is that when we first started the company, we used to always joke that hiring is a team sport that half the team doesn't want to play, right? You had this thing that recruiters are trying really hard and their hiring managers aren't really playing along and doing their part. And now we've seen almost 10 years later, it's a big shift where the hiring managers are more and more figuring out, oh yeah, like if I'm a head of engineering or head of sales, my success is entirely about how well can we hire. And yet there's this gap where those hiring managers don't necessarily have a shared vision of what does success look like? What does great hiring look like? And specifically, what is my role in that? What am I supposed to do to ensure that we hire well? right? And I do have a role. It's not just the recruiter's job, it's also my job. And so as we talked to more and more people, we realized that this gap was there. So we coined this phrase talent maker and said, here are the responsibilities of a talent maker. And then we wrote this book to help them understand, here's what great hiring looks like, and here's your role in it.
Well, that's really key because, if we don't communicate exactly, I mean, very specifically what we want from our team to look for when they're hiring, are we looking for more diversity? Are we looking for a certain level of talent or maybe it's a skill, maybe it's a personality type? For years we took on the strategy of we used the strength finders, and we gave everyone the test and said, where do we have lots of strengths, right? And everyone was like, oh, that's really cool. We have all these strengths over here. I'm like, yeah, it's really cool. But look at all the places we got nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're dead. We have no one in these categories. I'm like, we're not hiring anybody unless they fill one of these categories. We can get some checkbox. And that was, for us, that was a short version of a very long story. But like all of a sudden, who we started hiring and who started coming to me for the final interviews, massively different in how they looked, how they talked, where they came from, what schools they went to, their talents, their hobbies, totally different. Because before, it's just human nature. Like, I have 20 people to consider. Who do I pick? Well, the person who likes the sports team I like, who went to the school I went to, who kind of looks and talks like me, and that seems pretty easy. I can trust myself. I can probably trust them, right? And you end up with a company that it just doesn't ever change. It's just tunnel vision.
That's right. That's right. And I think, we tried to coin kind of 3 responsibilities of a talent maker. And so these are the 3 things that you've got to do. One is be a talent magnet, that you yourself have to be somebody who people want to work for, right? When you go to close a candidate and say, here's why I want you to work here, it's far more powerful when it's the leader in the company versus the recruiter doing it, right? Number 2 is you have to be a talent leader, which is to say you're setting the culture in your organization where you're saying, hey, we're going to really engage with strength finders. Like, what are the things that we're actually weak on? Where do we need to go, right? Recruiter's job, they're going to just pull a job description off the web and they're going to put it up there, and their job is to fill the seat. You as the leader have to say, no, this is what we care about. And this is why we want you to do interviews, and this is what you're looking for in that interview. And last is talent partner, is that you play your role vis-a-vis the recruiter, right? The recruiter has a very important role to play, but you also as a leader also have a role to play. And so you've got to support each other. And I think what we found so far is that it's an aha moment when people read it. They're like, oh, I figured out that hiring is important as a business leader. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing wrong or what I wasn't doing. Like, I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing. And then I read this and realize, oh, I'm not doing half the things I'm supposed to be doing. But yes, that's the point.
So what's the balance then for the recruiters, right? I mean, they're given a pretty tough job to begin with, to go out and find these people, and often to find the magical unicorn that doesn't exist for your, certain job type. What's the balance between like getting them to really understand what we're looking for from those really special key things to like letting them just do their job and get the people, and then maybe it's up to us as the leaders to decide which one of those candidates fits our process?
I mean, it's gonna be a partnership, right? Is you gotta have that open dialogue and say, like, listen, if you come up with this like purposeful requirements where it's like there are 2 people on the entire planet who fit these things, here's how long it's going to take and here's how expensive it's going to take to make that hire. If you're willing to open the aperture and say, are these things really critical, or what actually isn't so critical, now you're able to get a much more diverse candidate pool and have a better chance of making your hire. If it's like, hey, I brought 12 people on site and you hired none of them, well, then we have a big disconnect because I thought all these people fit what your requirements are, and it turns out they don't.
Right.
So ultimately, it's got to not be pointing fingers, but say, no, we each have a role to play. And how are we going to negotiate this together?
So do talent makers really serve the purpose in maybe helping the company create a more structured process, or is this, is it more like a larger concepts, right, that we say we agree to and then allow them to fill that in, or is it much more structured than that?
So, clearly the core of Greenhouse has always been about structured interviewing. Right? Is that you start from a plan instead of doing the random thing where you ask whatever random questions you happen to think of in the moment and say, yeah, he laughed at my jokes, let's make the hire. You actually start from a specific plan that hopefully you do with that hiring manager, with that talent maker, and you say, how we know this person's going to be successful? What does success look like for this role? What things do they have to have done or need to be able to do to be able to be successful in this role? And so we say, if you can't do that, If you can't start from that alignment between that recruiter and the hiring manager, it's really hard to run a structured process. And so that's the first place that I always counsel people when they're really struggling and not doing well, is say, start with a kickoff meeting. Start with like, can we answer these 8 questions together about this role? And if we can get on the same page there, it makes it much easier to run a structured process afterwards.
And that's probably something that has to be revisited constantly, right? Like monthly, quarterly, by position. I mean, I can see like organizations say, yeah, we're going to do this. And they talk about it one time and then like 3 years goes by and they're right back where they started, right?
What we tend to find is that there's a lot of companies who, structured engineering hasn't occurred to them, or the recruiter gets it, nobody else does. And it's really a struggle to get started, right? And I would talk to recruiters and they'll be like, it's never going to work at our company. They're so resistant. They've been hiring the same way forever. It obviously makes sense to do structured interviewing, but they won't do it here. And invariably what you see is once they start going down that path, they do the kickoff meeting, they set up interview kits where they say, here's exactly what's going to happen in each interview. Each interviewer is now given preparation. So before you walk in the door for the interview, here's exactly what you need to know about the candidate. Here's the exact questions you're going to ask. You're going to meet 5 candidates in a row. You're going to ask them all the same questions. That'll be really easy to calibrate between them. It's something you get momentum. They get to the huddle at the end of the process, and they're like, oh, we totally have alignment on what we're looking for. We collected consistent data across every candidate. It's way easier to make a decision. And then what you find is it spreads virally in the company, because it never happens across the whole company all at once, right? Is that people say, oh, I'm never going back. And so every day we have people who buy Greenhouse. We say, why'd you buy? And they go, because I used it elsewhere and I'm not going backwards. Once I've seen how this can work, how the structured everything thing goes, like, no, we're not gonna relapse back to how it was, because it was that bad.
So does this kind of process create a competitive advantage in your opinion?
Absolutely, right? If you have a great structured process, you're gonna have a better candidate experience. You're not gonna ask the duplicative or illegal, irrelevant questions, right? You're gonna be faster. Alignment creates speed, right? If everybody's on the same page, you can go way faster and make your hires way faster. If you're able to make decisions where you can opt people in and hire people that everyone else misses because they're blinded by their biases, you now have access to talent that no one else has. And so there are all these places where a structured interviewing process absolutely creates a competitive advantage. Right now, as we sit here on June 1st, right, of 2021, the great rehiring is happening. And we're talking to people all over the economy who are like desperate trying to hire. Say, hey, if you could more predictably, quickly bring on the very best talent, would that be a competitive advantage for you? Everyone would say yes at this moment.
Yeah, and that's really huge, and especially because we're seeing that maybe a whole bunch of people are going to leave their jobs, whether that's because they're not getting the flexible work that they're wanting, maybe it's because they've just been holding on, they're not really happy anymore, maybe it's just having something new, having a new challenge, a new role would just sort of create a new path for that person, right? And also been reading like they've been spending the last year getting training, and they basically kind of upped their game, and so they're going to be looking for that new job with those new sets of skills or education that they got. So we may see this incredible turnover, which as a background check company I won't mind, but that's certainly going to be a challenge for a lot of organizations.
That's my theory. I think there's a lot of folks who normally would have left their job in the normal course of business and said, oh, I don't like my boss, I'm ready for something new. And they didn't want to go through remote onboarding. They didn't want to take the chance of being the newest hire at a company potentially doing layoffs. And so a lot of people stuck in where they are. And I think now that everything's freeing up and you can say, take a little break over the summer and then get a new job and trust that you'll be able to get a new job, I think we'll have huge turnover throughout the economy.
So in Talent Makers, you explained that over the past decade, the job search process has become markedly different. I think you wrote, the war for talent is over, talent won. What's different today than in the past?
I think that the balance of power is changing, at least in parts of the economy, where it used to feel like company opens a job, they get 100 applicants, they can do whatever they want, they can choose whatever they want. They don't really have to compete. All the candidates are competing for them.
Right.
Now what we see in huge parts of the economy is that shifted, right? Is the candidates have the expectation like, no, or employees, I'm going to move around jobs every couple of years. Companies are saying, listen, the value of a great employee is getting bigger and bigger, right? If we're talking about like information age economies, the Googles and Facebooks of the world, the difference between a good and a great employee has gotten way bigger. So they're desperate for that top talent. Everybody wants to reach that one person. And so because of that, I think companies are having to try a lot harder to compete and win for those people, which I think is a very different power dynamic than you maybe would have seen decades ago.
And, this always seems to come up every so many years where people just want to sort of blame the next generation coming in, right, for being difficult or being different or what have you. But I will say that I didn't really see a huge difference with millennials other than some of the more positive things that they could bring to the organization, right? Their ability to be able to use technology and things like that. But I do notice that this newer generation does seem to want to just be able to do things quicker with less human interaction. And I'm noticing already organizations and from a marketing and sales perspective are making this adjustment, right? How can we help them buy the product they want to buy or get the service they want to get without having to talk to a salesperson, without having to, do all of this? Because a lot of the big research is saying B2B is going to change as more and more of those people get into positions of decision-making power. Do you think that that's going to maybe come to the hiring fold as well? That maybe would they get hired and go through a process with very limited interaction with people? And would that be a benefit for them, right? To be able to say, I want the job, let's figure out if I'm the right person with the least amount of friction among the human perspective, right? And then get in the door.
I don't know. It seems like that's coming from the other side. If the recruiters are saying, boy, if we could do less human interaction and more automated assessments, that would make our lives a lot easier. I think the issue becomes really dehumanizing. Yeah. And so from a candidate, you're hearing a pushback of people who don't like doing these video interviews. And there's a potential for, the ethical AI issues where people are saying, oh, we're going to use these machines to rate people and make decisions about folks. And that gets a lot of people really nervous about like, well, how are those decisions getting made? So I don't know that the candidates are going to start demanding it and saying, I want to talk to humans less. I just want you to rate me programmatically and get me the job or not.
Well, I mean, on one end, it could be a way for us to meet a lot of our goals around diversity and inclusion, diversity of thought. I mean, if we're putting someone through a process and we're not allowing humans to come with all their biases and crap, right? If it's, geez, they have this experience, or they have these, if we could test them somehow, they have these, abilities, does it matter whether or not I'm on the phone with them and I like them, right? Yeah,
I mean, it opens up another can of worms of like, well, how did the machine make these judgments? Because they're typically based on a whole bunch of past human judgments. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Because if we program it with our biases, it's just going to keep going. Was that garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah.
Well, is there a book that you're reading these days? If someone maybe has already read your book, is there another book that maybe you might suggest people check out?
The one I'm reading right now is called Noise by Daniel Kahneman and Cass Sunstein. I'm like looking at it right here. I've always found what their previous books, like Thinking Fast and Slow, are really good. But this new book, Noise, is really about decision making and how not just bias, but noise slips into all these decisions, whether it's doctors or judges or the hiring decisions. And so somebody gave it to me and was like, this is so on point for everything you guys talk about with Greenhouse.
Yeah.
And it's really a lot of the kind of scientific underpinnings of the stuff we talk about. And just like every page I'm reading, I'm like, yes, this is exactly how we think about things. This is amazing. Yeah. So love that book.
Well, I'm so glad that you brought that book up because I didn't know it existed. Because the last one I had read, I read Thinking Fast and Slow, but I actually prefer the Undoing Project, much better version of the same story. I didn't know Noise was out because I love Kahneman. That's fantastic. So
it's great. No, I just started it like halfway through, and it's really it's excellent.
Well, how can people find out more about you if they're interested in finding out more about Greenhouse or your book? What's the places for them to do that?
Of course. So companies at greenhouse.io. Book, we have a website at talentmakersbook.com. That's mostly where you find me. I don't really live on social media, so I can't give you my Twitter.
Well, if you're interested in Greenhouse and you're interested in background checks, the good news is we're already connected with these guys. So we'd love to have, come in and help you on both ends. Jon, it was a great pleasure to have you on the show today. Really appreciate your, thoughts on this part of the sort of the human capital perspective and love to have you come back at some point and give us an update on everything you're doing.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'd love to.
All right, everyone, don't forget to check out my new book, which landed last week, Remote Work. Everything you ever wanted to know about how to have a remote or hybrid team and how to get it done. And appreciate everyone tuning into the show live today. And don't forget, if you're want to listen to the podcast, go and subscribe. Hopefully you've learned something you can use in your own career in a positive way. Until next time, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today. Thanks, Jon.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Talent Talk Radio, brought to you by People.
That's right.
Too.
Yep.